Good morning. I wanted to jump on and do an IGTV because I haven't done one in a while. And because those of you who follow my Instagram stories may have seen that I recently put up a piece of a conversation that I had over on Facebook involving associate veterinarian compensation models and pro-sal versus salary, that kind of thing, and how we get paid. And I wanted to dive into this a little more because I think that it is a very important, I mean, we are professionals and this is our job and of course we love it, but money is important and we need to break the taboo about speaking about money. And also because there are a lot of strong opinions on this and I wanted to discuss them and some of my experiences, some of the experiences that I've heard from other people, and also what some of the science says, because there is some science behind it. Most of it is based on human medicine studies, but they have done studies to look at certain things. And I have not done a deep dive into these studies, but I am familiar with a few of them. So I kind of want to discuss that a little bit with you guys and open up this discussion, because ultimately I believe that both of the models of compensation that we have, production or pro-sal, and salary, are flawed. And also, I need to take Charlie's stitches out. Anyway, where was I? Oh, yes. Employee, associate veterinarian compensation. So, I kind of wanted to discuss some of the pros and cons of each model. But first, I want to discuss why I think both models are flawed. And that is because, well, for starters, I think both models are, in the end, production-based models for the most part. Where do you come up with it? Where does the salary come from? It's just not a number that's pulled out of thin air. It is a number that is based on the financials of the practice. When you were hired, the owner has looked at the financials of the practice. They've looked at what the average doctor is pulling into the practice. They've looked at their revenue. They look at their overhead, and they make a decision about what they can afford to pay you based on the value that you are going to add to their practice. And on top, and if you are lucky, as they should be doing, at the end of the year, they look at what you've actually produced and the actual value that you have contributed to the practice, and they adjust your salary based on that number. That is how salary works. It's based on the numbers, just like production is based on the numbers. And that's important because veterinary hospitals are businesses. It's just a fact. And they need to be financially healthy businesses in order to continue to provide services to pets and to their families. That's how it works. And so it makes sense that they need to look at the financials and base salaries based on the financials and what they can afford. That being said, I think there's a lot more to it than just average client transaction and how many clients a doctor can see in a day, because there are a lot of other things that we do that affect the financial health of the practice long term. Things that we do that bond clients to the practice and make clients happier and more satisfied have a long-term impact on the hospital. It helps the hospital grow to be bigger and more profitable in the long run. It brings more clients in through word of mouth, and it has been shown that the cost of keeping a current client happy is far less than the cost of trying to get new clients. So the more that we can keep our clients happy and keep them coming through the doors, the more profitable the practice is going to be. And things that we do that keep clients happy and keep clients coming back and keep clients satisfied and keep clients spending more money in our hospitals are not necessarily taken into account when we do, when we figure out how to pay associate vets. And so I think that it is something that we need to find a way to quantify those intangibles and to compensate people for that, because that's a big issue. And that is one of the things that the studies have shown in terms of gender wage gap. And I'm not going to say that women are the only ones who do these things, but women are more likely to spend more time in an appointment with clients. They are more likely to spend more time on the phone. They are more likely to spend more time training and teaching other employees. And those things are not necessarily valued in the typical compensation package. And there is there is a gender wage gap that occurs from that, because we're spending our time doing things that necessarily are not necessarily generating direct revenue and income at that moment, but that make practices healthier in the long run. And so I think we need to find a way to include that into how we are compensating our staff. I think from what I've been seeing of the discussions, the vast majority of people, I'd say probably 70, 75%, prefer to get paid via production. And I think that the reason for that is understandable, because as veterinarians, we tend to be overworked. We have a lot going on. We feel obligated oftentimes to see all the patients we can, because we want to help everyone. And so when that emergency comes in at lunch or 5 minutes before we're supposed to close, we feel like we need to do that work. And it makes sense that if we're going to put in that extra work, that we want to be compensated for it. And so we see that if we're working ProSal, that if we see that extra appointment during lunch, at least we're going to get the production on that emergency, and we'll be compensated for it. And so that's definitely understandable. And so I just totally lost my train of thought. Where was I, Charlie? Where was I? So I think that that is the reason that most people prefer production. However, on the flip side of that, that's where I was, the flip side, I think that production tends to encourage us to work harder, push past our boundaries, and leads us potentially down the path of burnout and compassion fatigue, because we know that if we don't see that patient, we're not getting paid. So I know when I was on production-based pay, I almost never used my vacation. I had like weeks and weeks, like I would use a day here or there, but I hadn't been on a vacation in like 5 years, because I was like, if I go on vacation, not only do I have to pay for this vacation, but I'm not making money. And yes, I had paid vacation, but that paid vacation was based on my production, was based on my base salary. And then when I wasn't producing, I went into negative accrual, and it was this whole big thing. And so I knew that if I didn't work, I wasn't getting paid, and I got bills to pay. Mama needs money, right? And so it makes us feel compelled to work harder. And I think that it is one potential thing that can be potentially increasing the risk of burnout in our field. So that's something to take into consideration. I think that another reason that people like production-based pay is that they feel like it takes care of any inequalities if they're working with another associate, and that other associate isn't able, or doesn't, for whatever reason, can't see as many patients as them, is not the ones getting up during lunch to see those walk-ins, is not the one to stay late, and it keeps falling on you and you feel like you're working so much harder. Well, at least you're getting paid for that extra work, right? So it takes care of that inequality. But then on the flip side of that, there are issues with production where in some practices, depending on the culture and the people there, there's case stealing. There is, things can get competitive. It can promote a sense of competitiveness, and that's a problem. And then I think we also need to look at where our, what our clients think about this, right? Do you want your clients to know that you're being paid on production? How would they feel about that? How would they feel about your motives? I know that you know your motives are good. And most of us believe that we don't practice medicine any differently. I'm not 100% convinced that's true. I know that we believe it, but I do think that in subtle, subconscious ways, it can affect how we practice. The same reason that all the recommendations when you're looking for a financial planner are to find a fee-only financial planner and not one that works on commission. It's not because all financial planners who work on commission are unethical people who are going to make bad recommendations for you just so they can make a buck. It's because they have, there's an underlying conflict of interest that could be subconsciously affecting them. And I think that the same is potentially true for us. So I think that that's something that we need to be aware of. And And then I want to go back to the gender pay gap thing a little bit too, because a lot of people think that putting people on production will help take care of any of that inequality, or the inequality or the pay gap associated with minorities. I'm a little bit more familiar with the gender pay gap issues, but I do want to address, especially in our field, which is pretty much the least diverse profession there is, that there is definitely a pay gap associated with race and not just gender, and that is something that we need to pay attention to. And a lot of people think that the production-based modality will take care of that, because now your salary is being based solely on the numbers. It's all objective. No more pay gap. No more discrimination. But we found that that's not true, because guess what? Our clients have implicit biases, and I'm not at all saying that they are racist or sexist. I'm just saying that we have implicit biases, and studies have shown that even in production-based models of medicine, that there is a significant pay gap. And they've shown that human doctors, women make 17% less than men in general practice, and they make 37% less than men in specialty practice. And that is even with production-based models of medicine. And the reason for that is, at least in the gender area, is that there are different expectations for women. People expect women to spend more time with them. They expect them to be warmer and fuzzier. And so when they're not necessarily, a woman and a man who work exactly the same are not necessarily going to get the same satisfaction scores. They're not going to necessarily be able to convince clients to do certain tests or things, because there is some implicit bias associated with that. And so that's something to take into account too when we are thinking about these different modalities. And so those are some of my thoughts on it. There's a lot more. And if you have any thoughts or statistics or information, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. So drop me a comment below. Let me know what you think. How do you get paid if you feel comfortable with that information? Because again, I think that transparency is really important. Do you feel that you do things that are not compensated for in your salary? How do you feel about this? I want to hear it. Leave me a message. Thanks for listening to my super long ramble. Bye.